Thanks, everyone. Good morning. First, thanks to Tom and to Housing First Minnesota for inviting me, and two excellent presentations. I think that really blend perfectly right into what I'm going to speak about. And let me point out a couple things before I get started on my presentation that kind of play off of what Todd brought up and also what Tom just presented on. So Todd had mentioned appraisers can access RESNET data, and we have something we call the appraiser portal. It was done in collaboration with the Appraisal Institute, and it allows any licensed appraiser access to HERS rating information. And there's roughly about 2 million HERS ratings in our national buildings registry. So appraisers do have access to that, and they can use that for comparables. It allows them to search by zip code or by city and state to find homes that have been HERS rated in their market. And then another thing is that we have an API that will allow MLSs to actually auto-populate HERS index scores. And the MLSs can do that directly through us. We're also working with, Tom brought up Earth Advantage. We are working with them to be able to provide them with HERS data so they can also populate HERS index scores through their green building registry. So I think that there's a couple of opportunities here where we could start to get more HERS rating data into the North Star MLS in a much easier fashion. The API that we have is based on the RESO data dictionary for green fields in the MLS. So it's a few very simple data points that would allow an agent using North Star MLS to be able to auto-populate a HERS index score if one's available for the home that they're listing. So today I'm going to be talking about two different topics. One of them is going to be about data trends in HERS rated homes, and I'll start out at a higher level in terms of the homes in HERS rated homes in Minnesota, and then drill down a little more detail about specific components and how homes are being built, at least HERS rated homes are being built in Minnesota. And then I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about a new program that RESNET has called HERS H2O. And HERS H2O is a whole house water efficiency rating similar to the HERS index. So I'll get into both of those as I go through my presentation. So first, I'm glad that Todd gave a little bit of an introduction to HERS ratings and how they can be used, because my presentation kind of makes the assumption that everyone knows at least a little bit about HERS ratings, and this is the only slide where I'm going to talk just briefly about what the HERS index is. So the HERS index rates the energy efficiency of the home. It provides an index score. The lower the score, the more energy efficient the home is. So a 100 on the index scale roughly represents a home that was built to the 2006 energy code, the IECC, or International Energy Conservation Code. And a 0 would be roughly a net zero energy home. The current average for HERS ratings nationally is a 59, and I'll also provide some numbers for Minnesota on that. In terms of HERS ratings in Minnesota by year, here's a breakdown from 2013 to 2019. The reason this starts in 2013 is that is the first year that our national buildings registry was up and running, and all ratings were required to be submitted to it. Prior to that, our quality assurance providers had to maintain their own ratings. So ratings go back as far as the late 90s, but ratings beyond older than 2013 are actually stored directly with our quality assurance providers. So there's to date, there's within our registry over 46,000 HERS ratings that have happened within Minnesota. And then I'll provide a little bit more detail on what these ratings look like. But roughly in just over 20 years, we're at about 3 million HERS ratings. And I mentioned earlier that within the appraiser portal, there's roughly 2 million, and that's because those are the ones that are available through our national buildings registry. Here's just a map of HERS ratings from 2013 to 2019 across Minnesota. Generally, HERS ratings are done primarily on new construction. 95+% of HERS ratings are done on new construction, although a HERS rating can also be done on an existing home. And that's not an uncommon thing to see, especially for utility programs or retrofit programs. But primarily HERS ratings are going to be new construction, so they tend to follow the new construction market. So where you're typically going to see a lot of new homes being built is where you're also going to see more HERS ratings that are being done. So how does Minnesota stack up when it comes to HERS ratings? When you look at the average HERS index score, Minnesota comes in fourth, and you can see the three states above that that came in first, second, and third, Maine, Hawaii, and Vermont, have significantly fewer ratings in this period from 2013 through I believe that was September of 2020. So fourth is actually really good considering the amount of ratings being done in comparison to the other states. Those other states are definitely building some very efficient homes, but a much smaller market. And then when you look at total HERS ratings from that 2013 to 2020 period, Minnesota comes in 13th. But this is looking at just total number of HERS ratings is not really a fair way to compare, because obviously in a state like Texas, where they're building far more homes than Minnesota, they're going to have a lot more HERS ratings as well. So another way to look at this is actually by the percentage of new homes that are receiving a HERS rating. And this, when we look at it in this fashion, Minnesota actually ranks sixth. So this map here shows the percent of new homes in a state that have received a HERS rating in 2019. The clear leader here is Massachusetts, with 85% of all their homes receiving a HERS rating last year. But then some other leaders, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, are also top of the list. And like I said, Minnesota comes in sixth when we look at it from this perspective. One of the questions we often get is, what is it that drives HERS ratings in an individual state? So when you look at Massachusetts, they have HERS as part of their building code and also part of their Green Communities program. So that's one of the things that drives HERS ratings in Minnesota. In other states, it could be a utility program that's primarily driving HERS ratings. It could be in certain states, it's just sheer competition among builders, where in certain markets, like Phoenix, for example, over 75% of new homes in Phoenix are receiving a HERS rating. And a lot of that is what the market is driving. Builders feel like in order to be competitive, they need to have a HERS rating in that market. When we look at the top 10 states for HERS ratings that have a HERS index score of 48 or less, Minnesota is actually kind of the clear winner here, coming in at number one, with Colorado coming in second. And so you might ask, why choose a HERS index score of 48 or less? And the reason we did this is actually as part of some research we've been doing on HERS ratings and as they relate to net zero construction. And we chose 48 because when a home can hit a 48 with efficiency measures only, they're typically going to be able to achieve somewhere in the net zero range once you add in solar. And so that's why we chose that number. But it just so happens that when choosing that 48 or less HERS index, that Minnesota actually has the most homes with that index score. And the period of the data for this period went from January 1, 2019 through September 30th of 2020. And I'm going to get into more detail in the next few slides about this data. So last month, a colleague of mine was he had to do a net zero presentation for a small conference. And he asked me to pull some data from our registry where he could analyze to look at some of the trends in net zero construction. So I took that same data set and pulled out all of the Minnesota homes. And again, this is from a time period of January 1, 2019 through September 30th of 2020. So in Minnesota, there were 4,285 single family homes. In this data set, there's 97 data points for each home. And all of these homes have a HERS index score of 48 or less. And I'm going to use this data set over the next few slides to show some of the trends in how homes are being built in Minnesota. So when we look at the average home, insulation in the ceiling, R45, envelope leakage at 1.4 ACH50. At 1.4 is actually among some of the most tight building envelopes among HERS rated homes in any state. It's very good when you look at all HERS ratings across multiple states. Generally high efficient furnaces, and because it's a heating dominated climate, good furnaces and mediocre efficiency on your air conditioner, because obviously you're not going to save a ton of energy having a really efficient air conditioner in Minnesota. Wall cavity at R20, continuous wall insulation. It doesn't seem that a lot of builders are using continuous insulation on the exterior. An average R value of 1.2 for homes that did use exterior rigid insulation. The average floor R value is a 32. And then for homes that had conditioned basements, some used about half of those homes used a rigid insulation on the foundation with an average R value of 3.3. And then the other half of the homes used a batt insulation on the interior side of the basement with an average R value of R10. So this is basically what the average home looks like in that sample set of a little over 4,000 homes. And then one thing I found out is that Minnesotans clearly like large homes. The average size home in this sample is 3,885 square feet, and that's conditioned floor area with 4 bedrooms. 67% of the homes in the sample have a conditioned basement. And then one of the things that was really interesting is natural gas is clearly the go-to fuel for heating, with 99% of HERS rated homes using a natural gas furnace. The very few homes that didn't use natural gas, a few used propane, and there were a very few number of ground source heat pumps as well. And then kind of similar for natural gas water heaters, 94% of water heaters were natural gas and 6% were electric. And a few other interesting facts that I pulled out. In this sample set, there were 84 Energy Star homes. So it doesn't seem that there's a lot of builders working with the Energy Star program. There were 12 homes in the sample that were part of the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home program that Todd also mentioned that in his presentation. In terms of water heaters, 95% of the ratings in this sample used a storage water heater. 5% had a tankless. Only 15 homes in the sample had solar. When it comes to ventilation, 53% had a balanced ventilation system. The remainder primarily had an exhaust-only ventilation. The lowest HERS index score in the sample was a -16. 96% of the homes had one heating system, which was a little surprising based on the average size of the homes. And then there were over 300, just over 300 builders doing HERS ratings in that sample set just over the last 18 months in Minnesota. In total, on a national level, there's a little over 6,000 builders that do HERS ratings every year. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now and talk about HERS H2O. And this slide here probably looks very similar to the one that I started off with, and that's because the HERS index and the HERS H2O index are very similar, and that they use 100 as the reference home. So in the case of HERS H2O, a score of 100 roughly represents a home that was built using common plumbing practices and plumbing fixture flow rates and appliance efficiencies from 2006. So again, it's that same 2006 baseline. The HERS index is based on roughly the 2006 energy code, And this is based on 2006 plumbing standards and practices in place at that time. Todd actually did a nice job in his presentation of showing some of the advancements and improvements made in plumbing fixtures and also appliances like dishwashers or clothes washers. And the HERS index scale does take into account those items. And similar to the HERS index, the HERS H2O scale is basically a 0 to 100. At this time, currently, we don't take into account gray water and rainwater. So it's not possible yet to get down to basically a net zero water home. But the next version of the standard, we do expect to account for that. So the standard I'm referring to is ANSI RESNET ICC 850. It was just published this summer. The development of it wrapped up back in the spring. ICC just completed the final publication of it. It's available. This standard is available to purchase on the ICC website, iccsafe.org, standard 850. So what this standard does is it lays out the calculations for determining what we call the water rating index. And for ResNet's purposes, we brand the water rating index as HERS H2O. There's a sister publication called Standard 301, which lays out the calculations for the energy rating index. And for ResNet purposes, we brand that as a HERS index score. It also lays out the requirements for labeling and also provides calculations for water cost savings. And that's really important because the builders that participate in the development of this really said that was something they wanted to see. They wanted to be able to on a certificate say this is the estimated water cost savings for this home compared to the reference home. And so that is something that can be calculated within the HERS H2O score and included on the rating certificate for the home. Here's some of the components of the water rating. Most of these should be fairly obvious: shower heads, kitchen and lavatory faucets, clothes washers, toilets. Does take into account water softeners, dishwashers. If there's excess pressure in the home above 90 psi, there is a little bit of a penalty because the data shows that those homes will use a little bit more water. And then irrigation has a huge impact on the index score. And we also account for whether or not there's a pool or a spa on the property. A few other factors that are included in the rating: the size of the home, the conditioned floor area of the home is included, the geographic location. So if you're located in a very arid area that tends to need more irrigation for plants or grass, that's also taken into account down to the zip code level. Then the number of bedrooms is used as a surrogate for the expected occupancy of the home, the number of people that are expected to be living in the home. We also take into account the lot size, the entire size of the lot that the home is sitting on, and then more specifically, the area of that home that is landscaped, and then the area of that landscaping that actually is receiving any type of supplemental irrigation. It also takes into account the hot water distribution layout. More specifically, it's looking at what is the furthest distance from the water heater to the furthest fixture or appliance that uses hot water. What is that distance? And it takes that into account, as well as whether or not the hot water pipe has any insulation on it. One of the more interesting things I learned as I've worked on water efficiency over the last several years is that drought is often looked at as one of the key drivers in water efficiency efforts. And that's definitely true in that areas that are drought prone tend to be much more aware of their water usage. This is the U.S. Drought Monitor from last week. And one of the things that's interesting about this, and not just being able to see the areas where there's severe drought, but in understanding the drought prone areas, when you also look at water costs are actually really in many areas independent of the impact of drought on that area. Water costs are actually driven even more substantially by infrastructure maintenance costs, upgrading and replacing water and sewer lines. They weigh significantly on the cost of water. And over the last decade or so, water prices have increased significantly. And here's a chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows essentially that water and sewer rates over the last 10 years have increased by about 65%. Now, when you compare that to the increase in food, the cost of food, which was about 18% over the same time period, and then all consumer goods rose about 20%. So it's clear to see the price of water and sewer, the cost to provide that is increasing significantly. And what this means is that even in areas that are not prone to drought, there's the potential for water efficiency, for water cost savings for that homeowner by doing things like installing WaterSense fixtures and as I'll show in a few minutes, achieving the WaterSense label for a home, which can also be done through HERS H2O. The real takeaway for me in a lot of the research that I've done on water efficiency is that there's, regardless of the location, whether you're in an area that's of abundant water or not, the cost to maintain water and sewer infrastructure is going to be substantial no matter the location, and that's going to drive up the cost of water and sewer, which again makes a HERS H2O rating and the water and the cost savings something that's appealing to homeowners and reducing their overall cost of home ownership. So RESNET recently launched a really exciting pilot program with EPA to use HERS H2O for homes to achieve the WaterSense label. Now, this is part of a revision to the WaterSense program. As I mentioned, is only in the pilot phase, but eventually will be launched fully at a national level. So we're currently working with EPA WaterSense to be able to provide the WaterSense label for homes using the HERS H2O score. This pilot kicked off in the Las Vegas market in September, but we have the ability to move to any other markets where there's interest from builders. So we do expect that this pilot will expand so long as builders and HERS raters are interested. And it's actually fairly easy for a HERS rater to get involved with doing HERS H2O ratings. So a certified HERS rater, in order to start doing HERS H2O ratings, has to just take roughly a 3-hour HERS H2O online training, and then watch the WaterSense version 2 training video, which is about a 30-minute video that EPA put together. And then they have to work under a HERS H2O provider. Currently, we have about 26 providers that have been accredited to do HERS H2O and WaterSense ratings. And for a builder to achieve the WaterSense label using HERS H2O, you have to achieve a score of 70 or less, which is basically a 30% savings from the reference home. And then there's a few mandatory requirements that are very simple. One of them is that you have to use a few different types of WaterSense labeled fixtures. And then at the final inspection, the HERS rater has to do a check to verify that there's no leaks happening anywhere in the home. But other than that, the WaterSense program is moving toward this more performance-based metric and away from the previous prescriptive metric. So homes can still receive the WaterSense label under the older version 1.2, but through this pilot program, builders can now use this performance-based HERS H2O approach to also achieve the WaterSense label. And we've had over 100 homes just since September that have already achieved the WaterSense label using HERS H2O. And with that, if anyone wants to contact me, here's my email address and my phone number. So please be in touch if you have any other questions that I don't get to today.